The most famous samurai movies. Miyamoto Musashi, Duel on Ganryu Island. 1965 5 of 5. In the movie, we have received a digest version of parts 1 through 4, but I have omitted them and focused on the final battle on Ganryu Island, so please understand. After burying the Yoshioka clan at Ichijiji Sagaramatsu, Musashi promised to meet his nemesis Sasaki Kojiro again and set off on a journey of training. After bowing to the departing Takuan, Otsuyu finally found Miyamoto Musashi. Otsuyu chases after him with all her might. However, Musashi coldly says, "Don't follow me, this is because I love her but we cannot be together," and he knows that Otsuyu will not be happy if she follows such an irresponsible man, which is why he is unable to warmly accept her heart. For a long time, Musashi has been thinking about completing the path of the sword, but he has only two options: continue on the path of the sword or abandon it and live with Otsuyu. And as Musashi was putting all his energy into the fight with Kojiro, it was all he could do to concentrate on one thing. After parting ways with Otsuyu, Musashi shot down a pheasant that leapt at him, and met a young boy named Yori Kaneko Yoshinobu who had been watching. When Musashi followed the boy, he found Yori sharpening a sword. Musashi was surprised to see him sharpening, and when he heard the words "cut down his father," Musashi did not know what Yori was planning to do. But the young boy was about to cut down his father's body and bury it. This is a historical novel set in the early Edo period, but if a boy today had a sword or something sharp, would he cut up his father's corpse with it? No, he wouldn't. This just shows how strong the independent spirit of boys of that era was. Musashi must have been deeply moved to see the boy's attitude. Musashi did not know that Yori was Otsuyu's younger brother. There used to be a boy called Jotaro, and he would surely have been able to meet his father, a Kamuzo priest. However, when the boy, whose father had died, tried desperately to bury him, the sadness he had been holding back until then suddenly came out, and Yori burst into tears. Yori thought that since an adult's body would be too big to carry, he would cut it into smaller pieces so that it could be carried. When Yori and Musashi went to the hut where Yori and father lived, they found his dead father lying there. Musashi told Yori not to cry, that he would help, and Musashi and Yori put his father's body on a horse, covered it with a straw mat, and carried it to the cemetery. His mother's grave was nearby, and Musashi seemed to think that he could not help the boy who was suffering on this land. So after digging his father's grave and burying him, they returned to the hut and prepared to go on a journey. But Yori started collecting rice husks. Yori explained to Musashi that they would sow them in the spring. 1 grain of rice would become 900 grains. Musashi was worried about what to do next, so he asked Yori about his relatives and who he could consult with. He answered that he had heard from his mother that Yori had an older sister and that he would consult with a nearby monk. Musashi felt a little relieved and went outside and started walking. Then he heard the samurai shout, "You idiot!" This meant that he was angry that such a small child was trying to live alone, and why the traveling samurai would not help him. Musashi decided to return home after hearing this. He asked Yori to leave him here. Musashi asked the young Yori to leave him there, and we can see his desire to learn from the boy. From then on, Musashi cut down trees, cultivated the fields, sowed the rice that Yori had collected, and grew rice. Although Musashi lived by the sword and shed human blood, he wanted to nurture the life of rice, learn from nature, train himself through agriculture, and learn a new path, The surrounding farmers ridiculed Musashi and Iari's wasteful efforts to cultivate the wasteland, saying, "Why don't you just stop trying?" But Musashi replied, "We'll know if the rice will bear fruit until autumn," and waited. As a result, the rice produced beautifully. Here is an anecdote from director Uchida Tomu. He made a film about the coexistence of the earth and humans when he was young, and in this film, he again depicts Musashi walking along while helping Yori. And we can see that he has spent a considerable amount of time depicting people involved in agriculture. In particular, considering that rice is the staple food of Japan and that it produces the best rice in the world. The social climate that favors an increase in blue-collar workers who wear beautiful suits and live in cities using computers can be considered to be promoting a move away from agriculture. Considering that the director appealed for the importance of self-sufficiency in food at that time, it is hard not to feel that he is proposing Japan's national policy, not only through Musashi who seeks the sword, but also through Musashi who returns to the earth and tries to rebuild Japan. Also, Jayataro looked up to Musashi as his master in pursuit of the path of the sword. But Yori learned not only from his master Musashi but also from the nobility of hard work, learning from him the value of not only the sword but also the value of hard work. One could say that they are both seekers of the same path. Later, the two meet a middle-aged samurai on horseback, Nagaoka Sato Kataoka Chizo, a retainer of the Hosokawa family. Yori introduces him as Nagaoka Sato, a retainer of the Hosokawa family whom he has known for some time. One autumn, when Musashi's hard work bore fruit and he had obtained 2 sacks of rice, bandits attacked the village. Kurosawa's Seven Samurai is a famous film in which 7 samurai chase off the thieves who come to steal the rice and wheat that farmers have worked so hard to grow. And Yoshikawa Eiji also set a scene in which Musashi drives away the opposition. The bandits are repelled by Musashi's angry sword. With the farming season over, Musashi takes Yori to Edo and stops by the house of a sword sharpener, Zashino Kosaki, where he sees Kojiro's beloved sword, a clothesline pole. Kojiro was discovered by Nagaoka Sato, a chief retainer of the Hosokawa clan, and was employed as an instructor for the Hosokawa family. Meanwhile, Musashi, who is staying at an inn, uses Yori to tell the horse dealers that they are being noisy, and asks them to be quiet. The wild horse dealers all attack Musashi, but are quickly defeated. In the end, they become impressed by Musashi's skills and begin working for him as his subordinates. The most amusing scene here is when Musashi picks off the flies one by one with chopsticks, and throws them away because they are clinging to the food and making a lot of noise. The horse dealers watching this almost give up, realizing that no matter how hard they fight, they will never be able to beat him. Musashi and Yori were spending peaceful days under the care of Kumagoro Ogata Shinosuke, a gambler who was enthralled by their skills. But one day, Asuji, who had found out where they were from Kojiro, came to their house accompanied by a townsman, Hango Yajibai. However, Musashi escaped the commotion by getting into the palanquin of Hojo Iwanokami, a shogunate instructor who had come to pick him up, and entered Iwanokami's mansion. The reason Asuji is targeting Musashi as her enemy is because she believes that it was Musashi who invited her son Matahachi Kimura Isao to the Battle of Sekigahara and prevented him from returning to his hometown to be with his mother after the battle, and she is still stuck to that belief. Musashi is strict about justice, but has no intention of trying to control the lives of others. Matahachi willingly chose the easy path where he didn't have to do anything. There, Musashi meets Yoshioka Tajima no Kami to Murataka Hiro, the current sword instructor for the Tokugawa shogunate, and Takuin. This is because Takuin recommended to the shogunate that Musashi establish himself as an instructor for the shogun's family. Without Takuin, Musashi would not be who he is today. After the Battle of Sekigahara, Takuin tied Musashi, who had become like a wild beast, to a pine tree with a rope and hung him upside down, giving Musashi a chance to think about what to do. He then imprisoned him in Himeji Castle for 3 years, giving Musashi a chance to read numerous books. And this time again, with Takuin's recommendation, he was being selected as an instructor for the Tokugawa shogunate. So we cannot talk about Musashi without the monk Takuin. However, at a meeting of the elders, this was rejected, citing Musashi's having cut down the young Yoshioka Genzaburo in the Battle of Ichijiji Sagaramatsu. The meeting of the elders took a long time. So Musashi painted a picture of a tiger galloping through a field on the sliding door and left without telling anyone. Yoshioka Tajima no Kami, who saw the picture, said to himself that he had let a wild animal escape into the wild. I think this means that Musashi was the most suitable samurai to be an instructor for the shogunate, and that if the samurai of the Tokugawa shogunate had learned swordsmanship from Musashi, the number of sword masters would have increased rapidly. But it was a pity. This was also the case at the end of the Ichijiji duel, when the monks of Inryakuji Temple on Mount Hiei and 5 warrior monks scorned Musashi for his actions, calling him a heretic and saying he was still human. But they still saw this as something that could not be forgiven. However, Musashi's way of thinking was probably because he thought that as long as the revenge continued, Musashi would be a target when Genzaburo grew up. Do you remember Choichiro Kawasaki playing the role of Sasaki Kojiro, a former disciple of the Yoshioka dojo, who was unable to forgive Musashi for slaying the young Genzaburo in the Ichijiji duel in the previous film, and who ended up losing both his eyes and becoming blind? After that duel, he became completely blind, and lived alone in a small straw hut near Ichijiji Sagaramatsu, praying for the peace of the Yoshioka dojo's second-generation master Seijiro, Genzaburo, and his retainers in the afterlife. As Musashi passed by, Hikajiro called out to Musashi without realizing that he was Musashi and bowed his head. Seeing this, Musashi must have thought he had seen hell. If Musashi made a sound, it would be obvious that he was Musashi, so he just passed by in silence. But Hikajiro's sense of justice, that he must not kill a boy, led him to try to kill Musashi. A few days later, Musashi received a challenge from Kojiro. The duel took place in Kokura. Musashi left Kyoto after handing Takuin a farewell letter addressed to Yori and Sato. Meanwhile, Atsuko had heard news of Musashi from Takuin and followed him to Kokura. On the way, she was reunited with Mitahachi, Akumi, and Asuji. Now Asuji had cleared up her misunderstanding about Atsuko and clearly understood that Musashi had not ruined Mitahachi's life. As a result, Asuji cheered on Musashi like her own child, telling him not to give up. Musashi stayed at an inn before heading to Ganryu Island. He asked the boatman what time the sea would be high and low, and planned a strategy to quickly board the boat to leave the Hosokawa clan's pursuers behind when he boarded the boat to return. When he boarded the boat to Ganryu Island, he used his own sword to carve the Ro sword that was on the boat, making it longer than Kojiro's sword. After carving it, so that it wouldn't be too heavy but would be sturdy, and once it was perfectly finished, he took some time to sleep in the boat. This rest not only relieved the tension before the battle, but he felt that it was the best way to bring his mind and body into perfect condition for the battle. It is easy to think that there is no need to rest because of tension and impatience, but he did the opposite. Kojiro sat in his chair, wondering if Musashi won't come soon, and stared only at the sea. This difference in mindset made a big difference. I'm sure you have had many experiences where you felt energized after lying down for a short time. That's what Musashi did. In the original story and the movie script, Musashi arrives at Ganryu Island a little late, but Musashi wins this strategy too. This is because the longer you wait, the more impatient you become. I'm sure you've all experienced this. Kojiro, as expected, criticizes Musashi for being late and grows impatient. After that, Kojiro draws his sword from the sheath and throws it away, but Musashi explains to him that Kojiro has been defeated and that if you are trying to win, why would you throw away the sheath? This also shows the logic and invites Kojiro to become impatient. And Musashi's strategy is already to make a wooden sword longer than Kojiro's. A short sword cannot reach an opponent that is far away. This must have been a major part of Musashi's military strategy, as he fought many times. The same goes for the two-sword style. Two swords are better than one, once you get used to it. Musashi entered the sea and ran through the shallows to the right, waiting for an opportunity. When Kojiro tried to slash first with his sword, Musashi jumped high and hit Kojiro on the head with his wooden sword, causing Kojiro to fall. To test whether Kojiro was really dead, Musashi put his hand over his mouth to confirm that he was dead. And while the Hosokawa family's servants were watching in amazement, Musashi ran to a small boat, and the boatman immediately began rowing. When the Hosokawa family's servants noticed and tried to follow him, Nagaoka Sato, a retainer of the Hosokawa family, scolded them all, saying that it was unseemly and that they should not follow. Musashi disappeared into the mist. It was low tide at the time, so the boat was likely to drift out to sea. However, Musashi felt a strong sense of emptiness after winning the battle in the boat, despite having won the battle against Kojiro, who was said to be the best in Japan. I realized that the sword was just a weapon after all, and that I couldn't help but feel that my attachment to the sword was not a joy, but rather a vain one. I deeply reflected on what I had been pursuing. In one of the original author's proverbs, A.G. Yoshikawa said that the true joy of mountain climbing is not at the top, but rather on the middle of the mountain. I found this idea to be absolutely correct, and it is the same as what Musashi felt in this movie. After defeating the opponent, emptiness comes before joy. The true path of the sword is not to defeat the opponent, but rather the joy lies in the process. Someone, probably a fairly well-known person, likened the emptiness Musashi felt when he withdrew to the Pacific War. We can only say that we have won by exploring, like Miyamoto Musashi, the path that post-war Japan should take in place of militarism. What is this feeling of emptiness that comes with mastering the path of the sword, the more you master it? This is Musashi's monologue in the final scene. The Empire of Japan, which had pursued militarism to the ultimate degree and competed with the world's great powers, collapsed in vain. Why did they pursue militarism to the ultimate degree? Wasn't it to wish for the development of Japan? Wasn't it to protect the peace of the country and its people? Didn't the young people who opposed the Japan-US Security Treaty in the 1960 Security Treaty protests also wish for the development and peace of post-war Japan? The way of the sword. and the way of man are neither militarism nor utopian pacifism. In other words, the coexistence of defense and peace is the path we should aim for. I think this is the true theme and message that the Miyamoto Musashi series of all 5 films was trying to convey. I previously watched and explained Toei's historical drama, on Mitsushita Aoki, which is also based on a novel by Eiji Yoshikawa. The story is a masterpiece among masterpieces, depicting the conflict and friendship between the shogunate and the Aori clan lord who lived in Nagoya Castle, over a will written by the shogunate successor hidden in the castle tower of Nagoya Castle, that is, between Azumachi Ionosuke, the Aori clan lord's side, and Nakamura Kinosuke, a shogunate secret agent. At the end, Azumachi Ionosuke throws the will into the burning Sengakutani Valley in Hakone, because the will is the source of disaster that will kill people. And it was only then that everyone decided to stop fighting. Although it is the same original author, he regrets the endless number of people who fight over trivial things and die, and concludes that the top priority should be to pursue everyday happiness. As Musashi's last words, "The sword is after all a tool for fighting," show that he wanted to talk about what happiness is and to pursue it.